Hello, welcome to today's webinar on how to use the SART Toolkit. My name is Christina Presenti, and I work at the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. I'll be your guide for today's tour around the toolkit. You will hear me refer to my organization as NSVRC. We are a national technical assistance provider, host of an amazing library, and creator of resources that will help connect folks in the field with up-to-date information and current best practices. You can contact us anytime. There's a form on our website where you can contact us directly. You enter your information and we will get back to you in the manner you choose. And you can always contact us at resources@nsvrc.org. I'm going to jump over to the internet now and show you the SART Toolkit because I know that's exactly what we're all here to chat about. But before I dive into the actual toolkit, I just want to talk about another important organization, and that is the Office for Victims of Crime. They are the funders of this update to the SART Toolkit and this webinar. Without them, their diligence and support, this project would not be where it is today. I'll refer to them as OVC. You can see on the screen here a link to their website and a link to TTAC, which is their Training and Technical Assistance Organization. TTAC is another great resource. So if you ever have any questions about SARTs, they are a really great place to start. They'll get you connected to someone who can help you or help you themselves. And before I dive into today's webinar, which again really focuses on the toolkit, which is up on the screen now, I really want to give you a little bit of background about the toolkit's evolution, what you're looking at, and why this is such an important resource. The SART Toolkit was originally conceived of in 2005. With a release date in 2009. It was originally intended to be released on CDs to every SART across the country. There are probably some people listening to today's webinar that have never even used a CD. Due to the massive technological advances, the SART Toolkit became a website and was used for almost 10 years with minimal maintenance or updates. NSVRC and OVC worked through a cooperative agreement to develop the original toolkit as well. NSVRC and OVC began working on the most recent updates in 2016. So for the past 2 years, we've been pretty busy trying to get information to inform these updates. And one of the first things that we did was form our SART Toolkit Advisory Committee. And I've pulled the name of those folks up on the screen, and I'd really like to thank all of them for their great work. We then did an extensive outreach to the field and into the existing research to understand what's going on with SARTs, where they need support, and where their struggles were. We held focus groups, had individual conversations, reviewed the existing toolkit in detail, and at a high level with SART members. We reviewed website analytics from both NSVRC and OVC. We also reviewed some information from our advisory committee that have SART resources on their websites. We then did a national needs assessment survey that received feedback from states, tribes, territories, campuses, and 4 branches of the military. Next, we did an analysis of our technical assistance requests, questions that come in from the field to NSVRC and our advisory committee members. We also reviewed the SART discussion group hosted by NSVRC to understand what questions folks were asking other SART teams. Oh, and let me pause here. If you are not already part of the SART listserv, I really encourage you to join it. You can go to Google, type in SART discussion group NSVRC, and sign up. It is the only place for peer-to-peer support, peer-to-peer SART support. So introduce yourself, ask questions. It is one of my favorite resources. You can set your own preferences, how often you want to get emailed or how often you want to check in. But we looked at that, and that was a really useful tool to understand what types of questions people were asking and what types of resources people were already familiar with, and what types of questions people asked, some of the really tough ones that never got a response. While we were doing this, we devoured everything written about SARTs. So we read over 130 articles and resources to develop a literature review on SART effectiveness. And the goal of that was to uncover what best practices and outcomes are supported by evidence-based research. So you can read more about the history of the SART Toolkit and these updates in section 1 about the SART Toolkit. And I'm going to navigate back to our homepage here. And so we were doing all of that before we even started thinking about writing. And we really used all of those tools to figure out what we should be writing or what areas of the toolkit needed updates. And much to our surprise, there were a lot of the same struggles that were apparent in 2005 in SART work as there were in 2016. We hear a lot of, how do we get together? We're together, now what? We've been meeting for a year, but we haven't done anything. What should we be doing? We did some really, really great work, but it died off. Or, we're doing really, really great work, but it's still not having that really big impact that we want it to have. We're seeing small outcomes, but we were expecting something more, and they want to get there. So we know in doing this work and doing SART work that we as individual agencies in victim service and anti-violence fields struggle with burnout, sustainability, high turnover, perpetual lack of funds, training, and access to the most up-to-date best practices. So we thought about all of that a lot. And there's a lot of new information in this toolkit for all of you dealing with concerns that I just mentioned, and a lot more. But those were some of the real things that we listened to from the field when we thought about these updates. So throughout all of this research and these conversations, it really did brighten our spirits to see that over time, there are a lot of success stories, a lot of SARTs that are improving their outcomes in different areas, which means that there's a lot of hope and a lot of potential for other SART teams to have similar impacts in their community. We've seen more communities build SARTs. We've seen more SARTs intentionally engaging in systems change work. And we see more SARTs making clear improvements that have actual impact on victim outcomes, prosecution, and community safety. We are also seeing more evidence-based research on SARTs, and those reports, although limited, help us understand what is working and might work in other communities. So much of SART work is incremental and varied. In the same communities that would get rave reviews in one aspect of their work, such as their hospital response or law enforcement investigation, might get equally negative reviews of other aspects of their work or their response to or lack of response to specific populations. I mention that here because there's a lot of work to be done out there in this field, and particularly among SARTs. And within that, the context of all the work that there is to do, your SART could be very busy. Your SART has a lot of potential to make really meaningful connections and really meaningful impacts in for victims and in this movement. And I don't say that to be discouraging, but I do mention it because there's a lot of work, and SARTs are really in this great position to truly improve the experiences and long-term outcomes for victims, whether that involves prosecution or not. And we really hope that this toolkit makes it easier for you and your team to identify the best practices and move the needle towards just responses in your communities where they're needed most. So now that you know a little bit more about the context of what you're looking at and the updates, what drove our updates this time and how it came to be, we'll jump back into our tour around the toolkit. First thing that you should know is that it is huge. There's over 100 topics loosely divided into 4 buckets, so there's a ton of information. Second, it is important to know that we all think differently, and what may be intuitive to you about where a specific topic is will not make sense to someone else. So we apologize. we couldn't make everyone happy in developing our outline, but we did do our best to put it in a somewhat logical format. So if you can't find something, keep looking, contact us. Again, resources@nsbrc.org would be that email. So each section is set up really similarly. So I'm going to dive into section 4. Excuse me while I get there. So meeting logistics is section 4, and you saw that I navigated to there from our homepage. So every section has these subsections underneath it. So in section 4, there's only 2, SART formation and SART operations. And in each section, and when I say section, it could be an entire big section or a subsection. So here, there's a subsection on strategic planning. And what you'll see throughout the toolkit is that there's a header, such as this one, and then there's a brief overview of that topic, some information about the topic, and then there's resources. And you can see that on the screen now. And in some topics, there's also a list of subject matter experts. So folks that you can call, that you can talk to, that you can ask for assistance about that topic. Not all of them are TA providers, so not all of them are funded specifically to answer your questions or provide trainings. If you're looking for that, starting with NSPHR, OVC, and the folks that are really on the list of national TA providers is probably the best place to go for that. But we can make those referrals to those other organizations for you. So some of these topics are really brief. So here you can see this is a really brief explanation because some of these resources that we'll send you to are really fantastic and they're really robust. In other areas of the toolkit, you will see that we have written a lot. And those are areas where the information might not exist or might not exist specifically related to SART work yet or in the robust fashion of these other topics. So those are just some of the ways that the toolkit's set up, and we really encourage you to look at those resources, to go to those websites. Great. And so the other way, and excuse me while I scroll, so how do you navigate, right? You navigate up here, you go back to our index. Now we're in section 4, and we are at meeting logistics, right? So there's SART formation and operations. So I can go from between each topic up here, or if I go all the way down to the bottom of the page, I can jump back and forth. So now, as you see, I'm in SART operations. Okay, so we just looked at the SART formation section, and I'm going to jump back into, I'm actually going to scroll down to the bottom. And so this index button right here, that will bring you back to the home page. So the home page will be your best friend, I'm sure, as you navigate through the toolkit. Excellent. So a lot of the questions that I get asked are about who should use the toolkit. And we know that in the past, it was primarily coordinators, SART team members, advocates, people looking maybe for a specific topic related to SART work. So in your case, it might be the SART coordinator that comes in and reads about strategic planning, uses the resources, picks the best one for whatever the local realities are that their SART's experiencing, and bring that back to the team. For some team members, they might ask the team to read a specific section. So one of the best practices that we found is SARTs with more formal meeting practices tend to be more successful. They rate themselves as more successful. So we've added a lot of information about meeting minutes and agendas, and SARTs could easily take that, assign that before a meeting to everybody on the team. And when they come together, everyone's prepared to have a really meaningful conversation about what they want that to look like around their table and for their team. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use this content, and the coordinator could bring that to a team. Any team member could bring that to the team. We also picture other teams maybe downloading one resource and bringing that to a meeting, or using that to update maybe their protocol. So like I said, the information is largely divided into 4 buckets. So the first bucket is learning about sexual assault, SARTs, teamwork, formation, anything to do with meetings, playing nice in the sandbox, coordination, evaluation, membership, teamwork, decision making. So that information is divided into 2, 3, and 4. The second bucket is response. So responding to reports of sexual assault, and that information is in section 5. The third bucket is culturally relevant, trauma-informed victim services for all victims and communities, including and specifically those on the margins. This is section 6, and is also woven throughout the entire toolkit. The fourth bucket is offender accountability, and that is section 7. So for those of you familiar with the original toolkit, there are a lot of new sections. Technology, territories, Native Americans and Alaskan Natives, evaluation, systems change, cost of sexual violence, just to name a few. Some sections were rewritten and reworked with current best practices. For example, the protocol section and the confidentiality sections were rewritten and are quite robust. In my opinion, SARTs can and should have confidentiality training as often as possible, probably once a year, as there's a lot of misinformation that leads to mishandling of victim information and conflict among the team. It also leads to false expectations of team members' jobs, responsibilities, and roles that leads to conflict among the team. So we really hope that that information in here will be a starting place for SARTs that are trying to work through and do a good job and stay really grounded with a good foundation in confidentiality work. There's also a great webinar as part of the SART Toolkit webinar series that is available to you through the toolkit. I cannot recommend that webinar enough. That's another way you can interact with this toolkit, is that there are a number of videos and webinars that your team might watch together and have a conversation about, or that you could have as trainings as an individual. So there's a new evaluation section that I just want to point out. I know a lot of our field is moving towards evaluation, and I think that that section is very long, so make sure you're prepared for it, but it's digestible, it's very informative, and it's helpful for teams who want to develop some way to measure their work but don't know what to measure, or are measuring things but aren't using that information in a strategic way. And I think that this section is really great because it looks honestly at what capacity you and your team have and helps match that to what questions you'd like answered. So I think I have a tab, open, that was it. Okay, so this chart here that I just pulled up on the types of evaluation is one example where they're really clear on the types of things that SARTs specifically might be looking for and why that information is useful. And I think that this section here will really empower SARTs to maximize their existing resources to have meaningful reports and outcome measurements. So there are, like I said, a lot of new sections, and I'm going to jump to section 6. So section 6 actually has a lot of chapters, subsections, and then a lot of information in those subsections as well. So we do in this section talk about language access, historical trauma. We have lists of culturally specific subject matter experts, a section on faith, a section on the Black community, male survivors, immigrants, location-specific communities like territories and rural communities, systems-based communities like military installations, campus, detention centers. There are also great webinars on campus SARTs and PRIA that you can find as part of the SART Toolkit webinar series. Another great section in section 6 is across the lifespan. While SARTs tend to focus on adult victims, we do provide some information on minors, adolescents, and elder victims for SARTs that might serve multiple victim populations. I always like to pause here, and this is actually repeated in the About the SART section of the SART Toolkit. I get asked this question a lot too, is can my SART do multiple things? So my SART is focusing on adults, we're focusing on children, we're maybe focusing on DV and trafficking, and we're trying to do it all in an hour. And you know, we see that teams that are really focused on a particular topic or a particular victim population, they do better work. And the reason for that is because we see that if you only have an hour, you only can fit so much on an agenda. And a lot of the work that we do, because it is strategic, it is about systems change work, and it can't happen when we're constantly in crisis mode. And it can't happen when there's too many topics on an agenda. So one of the things that we've learned throughout this process is that if teams do have multiple focuses, which is fine, you know, be really clear that the agenda for the portion of the meeting where you're talking about trafficking is very specific to that, and the agenda where you're talking about sexual assault is very specific to that. To really honor the fact that there are a lot of different crimes, there's a lot of different responses that we should have in place for different types of victims and investigations that go along with that, and while recognizing the similarities and recognizing the tools that we have to help us, and especially in some communities where it's the same couple of people at the table for all of those meetings, right? So we're really trying to leverage a lot of resources. But we do just want to caution that even though we have some of those sections here, that it is really important to make sure that you're doing your best to treat a lot of, and all victims, right? But making sure there's specific time on that, particularly for communities that have multiple focuses or the same people at multiple meetings. Great. Well, thank you for bearing with me through that explanation. But yeah, it's really important because we see frequently that particularly adult victims of sexual assault kind of get left out of meetings when kids or trafficking become the focus. So there are a lot of topics here, a lot of topics to check out, and I really encourage you to click through, get familiar with it. It will take time because it's huge. So don't don't judge yourself if you're sitting there and you found something and want to go back to it and can't quite find it as easily the next day. But hopefully, walking through this webinar, we will help you learn the tools that you have to find what you're looking for. So now I'm going to go back to the homepage, and you get there through this link here. And I'm just going to zoom out and talk about the 3 main ways to find information. First, spend a lot of time in there, read everything. I'm kidding, but only a little bit. I've talked to a lot of SART coordinators that actually memorize the entire original toolkit. So I know that's a really high bar to set, and most of us won't have the opportunity to do that, and most of us will refer to it for SART orientation, another great way to use this. But yeah, so there's a ton of information. Click through, read different things, get you just kind of dive in, play around. We hope that that is one way to get in there and learn about it. So our main way of navigating through the toolkit is by clicking on one of these section headers. And as I told you about our 4 buckets earlier, that might help you identify which section header to click on. The second way to navigate through the toolkit is this button here, the outline button. So this actually has an entire outline of the SART toolkit. And as of today, not everything is anchored, but hopefully with time we will have a couple more direct links added throughout the toolkit between sections. But here, if I click on Welcome to the SART Toolkit, it will bring me right to that page, which we think is a really convenient way to navigate through the toolkit. But if you're looking for something, so say I come here and I want to know, okay, where is confidentiality? I don't have time to read, the 6 sections today, but we can do Control Find. I can type in, oh, look, evaluation is already there. So let's go to evaluation, right? So I can see this will bring me right to an evaluation section. So I can learn a little bit about the toolkit by reading this as an overview. So like healthcare confidentiality, confidentiality. So this is big section, big Roman numeral there, but this will walk me through like what information is in here about confidentiality. And again, I really encourage you to read that section. I think it's awesome. But that's a really convenient way to search through the toolkit. The third way to search through the toolkit is through the search feature. So this little button here will bring open our search. So if I type in confidentiality here, the results will come up. And look, the search toolkit is actually the first result. So the thing to know about the search on the toolkit is that it actually goes through the entire NSVRC website. So when you search, you might see results such as this that go to the toolkit, but you might also see other results related to confidentiality. Or look at NEDV's Safety, Technology and Confidentiality Resources Toolkit, which is another great resource. And that's linked to in the SART toolkit as well. So I'm going to click back on this here. And so this brings us to section 3, Build Your SART. So you will have to scroll down to find that section, but confidentiality has its own button here. So 3 ways of navigating, from that homepage, from that index, or through the search button. And again, the search button does go through the entire NSVRC website. So it may be more helpful for certain topics than other topics, but look for something that looks like, that says SART or that has a number next to it, and that should absolutely help. I am so excited that this toolkit has a search function. I know that was a #1 request from all of you when we asked what we should be doing with the toolkit. Great, so we have walked around the toolkit a lot, which I am so appreciative of you taking the time to take this tour with me. We are really excited to have this out in the world, and we really hope that it's useful for all of you. So my tips to you are, there's a lot in here, a lot of information. So go slow, read small portions, come back, and reread information. So we know that SARTs are incredible and present a great opportunity to really provide appropriate victim services, invite and support victims to negotiate their options, whether that includes prosecution or not, and hold offenders accountable. And we know that SARTs really represent their communities and local realities, so the experience that you're having today will change over time. And what might be really useful to you from this toolkit today might be something really different 5 months from now or next year. So go slow, digest the information, and contact us with any questions. There's also a list of subject matter experts throughout the toolkit, and we'd encourage you to call them. Build relationships with the folks who are funded to support you or with subject matter experts in the field. For example, I know we put a lot of resources around tribes and a list of subject matter experts. Look them up. If you are trying to coordinate with your local tribe, call them, talk to them, really get connected with the folks who are experts in doing the work and who can support you make those connections on a local level. Great. Are you a prosecutor seeking legal support? So there is this really fabulous membership section, and I think it might be in section 3. I'm going to jump there real quick. Yep, so SART membership here. This is actually, could be a very cool orientation tool for SARTs. So here there's lists of all the SART members, and I'm going to scroll real quick. But there's lists of all the SART members here and what their role is, what their purpose is on the SART, and the intention. So that's a great orientation tool. Take it, adapt it, use it to the extent that you need to. And in each of those sections, they're also really great because there's a list of subject matter experts. So in the prosecution section, there's a list of experts that anyone on the SART can call, but also that specifically support prosecutors, right? And so there's a lot of questions that we get about prosecutor buy-in. And so that section would be really useful for folks looking to support their prosecutors, have information from other organizations who are specifically for prosecutors. So they have the support that they need to be a full participating member on that team with you. So that's a great thing to look at. In regards to prosecutors, we also did a webinar on prosecutors' role in SARTs and how they are a great link to justice that I really encourage you to listen to. So SARTs, I mentioned all of these really great opportunities for connections and technical assistance providers and subject matter experts because there is so much support for you. And I hope that this toolkit, even if you don't find the answers, it does provide you with people to connect with. So make those phone calls and reach outside of your SART. I think one of the things that we asked people at the very beginning of this project was, where do you go when you have questions or information? And most of you turn to the people at your team and at your table. And that's excellent. It means you have good relationships and trust there. But I, as an advocate, only know so much, and particularly only know so much as often as I get in touch with my best practices or as I get in touch with my national TA providers. And so when I do that outreach, I become a better advocate and a better participant at the table. So I really encourage you to go look at those lists, and if you're not connected, get connected. There's a ton of people out there who want your SART to be successful and really want to support your SART in doing the critical change work that's necessary to truly support victims and your communities. So as always, you're welcome to contact us, NSVRC. We're a national technical assistance provider, and we're happy to answer your questions or connect you with the folks and resources that can. Again, there's a form on our website that you can click to, and resources at nsvrc.org is the best email to reach out to us for. I'm Christina, and I really appreciate you taking the time to tour the SART Toolkit with me today. I'm very hopeful that this great resource assists you in the great work that you do and assists your team and your communities. And we can't thank you enough for treating victims of crime with the dignity and respect they deserve. And we can't thank you enough for continuing to want to be a better team and do better work. And I know that you are among those people because you're listening to this and you want to get in touch with how to use this great new resource. So thank you so much for all that you do. We really appreciate it.